So let's just close with your wife. We haven't mentioned her yet.
Yeah, we met in New York City at D.E. Shaw & Co., where we worked. We got engaged. We dated for 3 months. We were engaged for 3 months, and then got married. So our whole kind of dating engagement period was only 6 months long. I would like to take a moment to talk about my parents, if that's okay. You didn't ask me, but I would like.
The richest couple in the world is
Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos and wife Mackenzie, the richest couple in the world, announced on January 9th they are getting a divorce. The news came 3 days before Bezos' birthday via tweet.
After a long period of loving exploration and trial separation, said a statement released on Twitter, we have decided to divorce and continue our shared lives as friends.
The news gave the world a shock, as the divorce could be the largest one in history, making Mackenzie the richest woman in the world.
Hillary, I gotta ask you, Jeff Bezos is, known as being a brilliant guy, and when I heard no prenup, I was just stunned. This is were you in the news and the legal community is kind of shocked about this as a man of such immense wealth to have no maritable preparation planning for this sort of turn of events? Was there surprise there?
Will you be clever at the expense of others, or will you be kind?
They met when they were very young. They met at D.E. Shaw, which is a hedge fund in New York. So they actually drove across country together. They've been married 25 years, and he started Amazon after they were married. If she were to get half, which is within the realm of possibility, she would be the 5th richest person in the world. She would be by far the richest woman. She'd be richer than Mark Zuckerberg at this moment in time.
In today's episode, we'll be looking at their 25 years of marriage in their own words. There are no better people than themselves to tell their roles in the marriage and family. So you can know whether Mackenzie deserves half of their net worth and become the richest woman in the world.
I got out of college and went to New York thinking I'm going to wait tables. Okay, here we go. And I'm going to use my extra hours to write my book.
Right.
And I was trying to write a book. I wasn't quite ready to write a book, truthfully. It wasn't going that well, and I was having a lot of trouble making ends meet.
Do you think it would be possible if I got a $100 advance on my salary?
And so, would I have ever considered a job in finance if I hadn't been having those difficulties? Probably not. So grateful I did, not only because I met Jeff, but also being surrounded for a year by people whose minds worked differently from mine. The education I got in quantitative analysis, and also I developed the character for my first book, which is an engineer.
And I know that resourcefulness is so important. You actually it was a prerequisite for the selection of a spouse, right? So this is in my 20s. This is way pre-Tinder, pre-Match.com, and so I had this. At a certain point, I decided I wanted to get married, and I had all my friends setting me up, and I had my list of criteria, and this was like good old-fashioned blind dates. I went on dozens of blind dates.
Excuse me, is there a woman waiting at the bar? Someone average height, dark hair, or perhaps doing a puzzle?
And it turned out I kept meeting people who were professional blind daters, and I sort of became a professional blind dater. And so we would sit down, and most of the conversation was quickly about how, we're not right for each other, but how do you meet people? And, it was actually turned into a very good... But when I was telling my friends my criteria, one of the ones that I would list was that I wanted a woman who could get me out of a third world prison.
Help me down!
And my friends were like, what are your future plans? What? And I said, no, it's just a visualization for somebody really resourceful, because I think that you don't want to go through life with teammates who aren't resourceful. And so you do want to go through life with people who, if you need, could get you out of a third world prison.
Hypothetically speaking.
Hypothetically speaking.
Yeah.
you were applying for a job at a hedge fund somewhere in New York, I think, as I remember, after Princeton.
Yes.
Both you and Jeff had been to Princeton.
Yes.
He's got a job.
Yes.
And you're applying.
Yes.
And he is interviewing you.
Yes.
And you then, I end up, and you pursue him.
Yes.
You were more interested in...
Oh, absolutely. By luck, he offered me a job, but I interviewed with some other people, and I was offered a job in another department, too. So I ended up taking a different job, but then, as luck would have it, got assigned an office right next door to his, and through the walls, I would hear him laughing, that giant laugh, all day long. And it was totally love at first listen.
Mesmerizing, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Oh,
I mean, yeah. Love at first listen.
3 months later, you got engaged, and 3 months later, you married. 6 months later.
Yeah.
You know, there was this guy who's like, what, late 90s Jeff, right?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And, you know, your eating habits at this point in your life were not great.
No. This is, you won't even believe this story. You're just going to have to believe me that I tell you this is true. When my wife and I got married, I had been eating a whole can for a couple of years. I had been eating for breakfast every morning a whole can of Pillsbury biscuits. So I would wake up in the morning, I would preheat the oven to 375, I would get out the baking sheet, I would crack open the Pillsbury biscuits, place them on there, and with butter. And I would eat the whole can.
And Pillsbury's new biscuit recipe bakes up crispier with the fluffier inside.
And I was skinny as a rail, and it was just, after watching me, so then we get married, and she watched me do this every morning as my spouse for like 3 months. And then she finally stopped me one day, and she said, "Do you know what's in that?"
Fat people are slow, awfully slow.
And I was like, honestly, that wasn't even a concept for me, that there was something in food. You know, that there was like I had never read a nutrition label in my life. I ate what tasted good to me. And so she kind of showed me the ingredients label, and we had a little very rudimentary discussion about nutrition, and I stopped eating the biscuits.
Well, I'm frankly very happy and somewhat surprised that you survived all of that. We're glad you're still with us.
So she was incredulous. She couldn't believe it.
Mackenzie, you know, she had married this stable guy working on Wall Street, and a year after we got married, I went to her and said, I want to quit my job, move across the country, and start this internet bookstore. And Mackenzie, of course, like everybody that I explained this to, her first question was, what's the internet?
What is the internet?
The internet is like a popular thing.
Because nobody knew. This is 1994. And but even before she could say what's the internet, she said, "Great, let's go," because she wanted to support it, and she knew that I had always had this passion for invention and starting a company. And so, again, I think, you know, Mackenzie is an example of this. But I was talking about with my mom and my dad, who's a Cuban immigrant, and he came to the U.S. when he was 16 in refugee camp in the Everglades. They're so loving and supportive that when you have loving and supportive people in your life, like Mackenzie, my parents, my grandfather, my grandmother, you end up being able to take risk. Because I think it's one of those things, you know, it doesn't, you kind of know somebody's got your back. And so it's just I don't even think you're thinking about it logically. It's an emotional thing. So I think it's anyway. I've won that lottery. I won that lottery of having so many people in my life who have given me that unconditional love. And I do think, you know, Mackenzie's definitely one of those. And so we moved, and then Mackenzie, who has basically no skill in this area at all, really, I mean, you're the least suited person for this. She did our accounting for like the first year. Was it the first year? Something like that. And she did it well. I mean, that's what's amazing. My wife is a novelist. She's won the American Book Award. Toni Morrison, the Nobel Prize-winning author, who was Mackenzie's teacher at Princeton.
So did she suggest then to do a bookstore?
Said on the Charlie Rose show that Mackenzie, Toni Morrison, the Nobel Prize winner, said about Mackenzie that Mackenzie was her best student ever. And so, anyway, Mackenzie is a very talented novelist, but she is not an accountant. But she pulled it off, and then, we all get done what we need to get done.
Did she then suggest that you focus on book business at the beginning, being an author?
No, I picked
that was your idea?
I picked books. It is true, she's a big reader, I'm a big reader, but that's not why I picked books. I picked books because there were more items in the book category than any other category, and so...
He wants to start a company.
Yes.
And he gets in his car and you go across the country.
Yes.
He's going to create. What was the dream as he articulated it to you?
He wanted to sell books over the internet. At the start, it was exactly that.
Because he realized that he had looked at the numbers and the internet was growing at something extraordinary.
Exactly.
And he said, "There's got to be gold here."
Exactly. But to me, Charlie, I'm not a business person. Right. So to me, what I'm hearing when he tells me that idea is the passion.
Is passion.
And the excitement.
Yeah. Right.
And to me, watching your spouse, somebody that you love, have an adventure, what is better than that? And being part of that.
Exactly.
Couldn't wait to hop in the car.
My wife has a great saying. We let our kids use, even now they're 17 through 12, but even when they were 4, we would let them use sharp knives. And by the time they were, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8, we would let them use certain power tools. And my wife, much to her credit, she has this great saying. She says, "I would much rather have a kid with 9 fingers than a resourceless kid," and which I just think is a fantastic attitude about life.
Luckily, you have resourceful kids with 10 fingers each.
Yeah, so far they have all their fingers.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah, exactly.
Bezos is here. She received an American Book Award for her first novel, The Testing of Luther Albright. Her new book, Traps, tells the story of 4 women whose lives intersect over the course of 4 days. Vogue magazine calls it a character-driven thriller that is both suspenseful and intelligent. And what did you tell him about your passion?
He knew that I wanted to write, right from the very start. It was what I had always wanted to do.
You're applying for a job at this hedge fund simply because you needed to feed yourself.
Exactly.
Jeff has been your first read.
Yes.
But you would not allow him to read this until what point?
No, really late. So he was a good sport about it. With my first book, I noticed something about the creative process for me, which is that the more I talked about the book, the more energy it would take away from my excitement about writing the story. And I wanted this time around to save that first telling excitement for the book. And it would also create kind of an incentive for me, because the truth is, so I didn't tell him anything about not the plot, not who the characters were, for 2 years. He was a good sport about it. He's such a good reader, and I wanted to get his reaction to the actual story so that he could be surprised in the right places. I didn't want to tell him what was happening.
I'm told he takes the book aside and whatever he's doing, he says, "Don't bother me."
Yep.
He sits down
and he
all
reads
in one day.
Through
in one day.
Yes.
Help! Help me! Casey!
And takes notes in the margin and comes at you and says, "This is what
I ask him a bunch of questions. My agenda when I show it to anybody is to say, this is my last chance. So where were you bored? Where did you not believe it? Where were you confused? Yeah. So I asked him those questions.
How do I correct what's wrong and how to enhance what's right?
Exactly. But also I have, I still have the copy he read. It's great because he very generously went through and wrote all the spots that made him laugh out loud and all the spots that made him cry. And I'm happy to say I had 3 of those. 3.
I have lots of pleasures, and we just came back from an amazing trip with the kids. Mackenzie and I did. She planned the whole thing. It was her birthday trip, but she planned it all. We went to Norway for 3 days, and we stayed in an ice hotel. We went dog sledding. We went to a wolf preserve and actually got to interact with, these timber wolves. I mean, it was really an incredible vacation, an incredible holiday, and we got it all done in 3.5 days.
Welcome back, New Shepherd.
So it was amazing.
When you are 80 years old and in a quiet moment of reflection, narrating for only yourself the most personal version of your life story, the telling that will be most compact and meaningful will be the series of choices you have made. In the end, we are our choices. Build yourself a great story.
I wish him luck. It's going to be a beauty.